Thank you, John and Ann Kesey. That's a song that the first time I heard it was at a Bible camp when I was like 15, and I haven't heard it since then, so I'm kind of choked up here. Well, it's nice to see each of you. Good afternoon to those of you that are here and those who are watching remotely. I pray that you feel a part of us today as you're watching. So often when we want something, we ask for God in it in prayer. But if he's silent or he answers our prayer in a different way, we can be filled with sadness and disappointment and anxiety. And seriously, sometimes I ask, why, God, haven't you answered my prayers for this or that thing or the thing that I'm certain that I need in my life? And there's so many prayers, I'm sure, that you have here today and of those watching today that have been prayed where God has been silent. And our prayers are answered in a different way. So the question I ask is, how do we handle these unanswered prayers? How do we continue to serve a loving God who doesn't give us what we want? That's a question maybe you ask at some point in your life. And sometimes then we sit in the place of asking, does God really love us? There are so many, and probably you know people who've walked away from the church or from God in their disappointment in prayer that wasn't answered. And sometimes the ways that they walk away are more subtle as they walk, and they go with the motions of going to church or a normal life, but their hearts ache. And we see it in the Christian community too. Many are deeply grieved over changes or loss or a life event that left them wondering where God is. I've been deeply grieved over things that I'm certain I need that he hasn't given to me. And when the answered prayer or the heavens are silent lead us to this doubting God's goodness and his love, that can make life really difficult, can it? But then I'm reminded that our sincere prayers grow us closer to him. And we know this, but we get off track sometimes. So prayer is meant, as we know, prayer is meant to grow us closer to God and to change us rather than just a means of getting something that we want from God. And the Apostle Paul, he writes about this in 2 Corinthians 12, 6-10. He wrote about the thorn in the flesh. I'm sure you've heard this. And as we read this, keep in mind that this was written by Paul, a man of God, a man who was a follower of Jesus, a strong Christian man, and he admitted this. And just before our passage today, Paul talks about these incredible spiritual encounters and these revelations that he's had and he's seen. And then he switches into verse 6, which says, "But if I wish to boast, I will not be a fool, for I will be speaking the truth. But I, Paul, I refrain from it so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me, even considering the exceptional character of the revelations." And he continues, "Therefore, to keep me, Paul, from being too elated, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I appealed to the Lord about this, that it would leave me. And he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that power of Christ may dwell in me.'" And then Paul continues, "Therefore I am content with my weaknesses, insults, and hardships, and persecutions and calamities for the sake of Christ. For wherever I am weak, then I am strong." Now, it's not clear what the thorn is. Paul doesn't specifically say it. Theologians think different things. Some think it's a physical ailment. And Reverend Cogna, I always ask him questions. He says many people consider the thorn may actually be a person intent on making things hard for him in ministry. And sadly, there are people that do that. They make it hard for us to do things in life, and for all of you as well. But regardless of what the thorn is, it's something bothersome enough that Paul, this incredible man of God, prayed for God to take it away, but he didn't take it away. And with Paul, we see here too that God was silent for a moment, but when he finally did respond, the Lord said to Paul, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And Paul has this incredible response. Here the Lord's told him he will not remove the thorn. And certainly that's not my reaction if the Lord tells me he's not going to take something away. But Paul understood that God calls us to the life of becoming more like him, for a life of sanctification. And the unanswered prayer is one way that we can draw deeper to a deeper place with God that allows Christ to do this work in our heart to become more like him. The difficulty can push us towards prayer, a prayer that aligns our life towards God's will. And that's not easy. So prayer, as we know, is meant to draw us closer to God, to change us rather than to get something from God. But when the heavens are silent, we struggle, don't we, with unanswered prayer. Perhaps it's the loss of things, of a relationship, of a loved one, of health, of loneliness, of an unfair situation, or like Paul's situation where someone just picks on us and makes life hard for us. And the Lord's answer is, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. And as I say this, it kind of sounds harsh as I read this. God to say, my grace is sufficient for you. And it's certainly not something as a chaplain I would speak to someone on bedside who's dying or they're sick and they're in pain. The bedside of someone, to say God's grace is sufficient, his power is made perfect in our weakness. But the Lord, he is fully capable of providing everything that Paul needed. The Lord is fully capable of providing everything that we need to endure in our life. And when we are weak, God's strength is even more evident. About 10 years ago, I found a lump, and I prayed that it was nothing. I didn't really even tell many people about it. And at first, even my doctor didn't consider cancer because there's no cancer in my family. I've got 14 cousins, aunts and uncles, no cancer. So the doctor sent me for an ultrasound. And there I watched as the technician's face went white. I asked her, is there blood flow to the lump? And she said, mm-hmm. She said, someone would get back to me that day, and she ran out of the room. I knew it wasn't good. And later they sent me for a biopsy, and it confirmed that I had cancer. And I was terrified. Me, cancer? God, how could you do this to me? I'm a single woman. I work like a 50, 60-hour week. How in the world am I going to get through this? Who's going to take care of me? Through the unknown weeks and the months, the process of doctor's appointments and tests and studies while working full-time was absolute. It was awful. I can't even describe how awful it was. And I was scared, and I was angry with God, and my prayers were more like yelling. And the next step was to have surgery in a few weeks. But I was still terrified, and I was mad, and all those things wrapped up in a lovely ball of negativity. I was not much fun to be around. And I prayed, Lord, help me. I don't like this. I wish I did not have cancer, but I do, and here we are. And I was fearful. I was fearful about many of the unknowns. But then suddenly, this is amazing to me when I think about 10 days before surgery, I had this total, unbelievable peace. The peace that passes understanding kind of peace, where whatever the outcome, I knew the Lord was with me and I knew I would be okay. And truly, I believe that. My friends didn't even believe me. I was so mellow and happy. I was like in this peace cocoon. Have you ever been there? It's awesome when God shows up that way. And as I was wheeled into surgery, life was really tough at that point, and I was terrified because I had never been under anesthesia. And I prayed literally, Lord, take me. Please take me, or change my life. And I woke up from that surgery kind of amazed. And I find anesthesia amazing because all these things go on and you wake up and it's all done. It's like, wow. So for weeks, tons of people brought food from church. They drove me where I needed to go. They stayed with me. And the Lord didn't take my cancer away. And I do believe God can heal. I've seen him heal. I still needed surgery, but he provided for all of my needs. Friends stayed with me, and I had this incredible peace. But God was silent for a season before I had this peace, and before then my spirit was crushed. Now, my example was a really short season. It was a couple months. But there are many prayers that many of you have had for years or for decades that you can join with, that the thorn is still there. The thorn was not taken away. The hard time is something you're still walking through. And Paul says, God says, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. For wherever I am weak, then God is strong. We need God's grace. We need the power of Christ to dwell in us. We need his peace. We need his guidance through life, which can be really hard, can't it? Only prayer can bring an internal response, and it's not a natural response. We each need those quiet times of prayer where we have this incredible opportunity to come before God, the creator of the universe, and sit and just abide in prayer. Yet still there are times where I just pray my laundry list of items. I still find myself doing that at times, and then I'm like, what am I doing? And of note, actually, all prayer is good. We need prayers. We need intercessors. We need Polly's prayer group, and this is my shameless ad. Polly's prayer group is the fourth Monday of the month in the Liberty Commons music room at 10 o'clock. And we need these groups. We need to come together with each other and pray for the needs that we have and the needs for others. So these are awesome opportunities to pray with one another, to connect as Christians and believing. But I know still when I'm stuck on the laundry list and I avoid just deeper prayer that connects me with God, in those times when I'm just on the list and I don't get beyond it, I hear the Lord, sense the Lord tugging on my heart saying, Amy, will you spend time with me? Will you please just spend some quiet time with me? Sometimes, too, in an unsuspecting moment, we're transformed through prayer. So in these times of unanswered prayer, remember, this is good news. He hears your prayers. He loves you deeply. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues our spirits when they're crushed. In Ephesians, it says, he alone is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in the flesh the dividing wall of hostility. God can do anything, yet our prayers aren't always answered the way that we want. I still had to have surgery. I still had the surgery that came with the drains and the medication and pain and some lasting side effects and health effects that I still have today. And you've had your valleys too. Maybe you're in a valley right now where your heart races and your mind is unsteady and you feel lost, but God can and will give you peace. I'm going to finish with an excerpt from Beginning to Pray by Anthony Bloom. It was published in 1970, and I just learned about this priest. His words are, the day when God is absent, when he is silent, that is the beginning of prayer. Not when we have a lot to say, but when we have to say to God, I can't live without you. Why are you so cruel, so silent? It is this knowledge that we must find or die that makes us break through to the place where we are in his presence. So as I end, I just pray God's blessing and peace over you. Amen.